Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Once again, we don't care where or when you're listening. We're just glad that you are. He's Marty Sheehan. I'm John Buzby. This is the Delaware High School Football Podcast. We're thrilled you're tuning in again. Don't have any real issues this week, Marty. It's a little quiet on the football.
That's right.
But we are going to talk about the new Appoquinimink School District football attendance policy in just a second. But I want to lead off with Hurricane Ian. Didn't amount to much. Some games were moved up earlier on Friday night. I don't think any of the Saturday games rescheduled anything, and good for them because, this was a forecast, Marty, where a lot of things on Saturday were canceled.
Right.
And there's probably some people that wish that they hadn't canceled. I was at the Appo St. George's game at noon, and other than a little windy, for me, it was perfect. There was no sun. It was not raining. It was right between shorts and long pants weather, which is perfect for me. It means I go with shorts. And so it really wasn't that bad. And the wind for the second half basically disappeared. But I get people who canceled things on Friday, knowing the forecast was Saturday was going to be a complete wipeout, much like today, Sunday, we record Sunday mornings, is going to be and has already started. It's already worse today than it was at any point yesterday. So thankfully, the hurricane remnants, it was not going to be a hurricane when it was here, did not impact much. Even the rain they had downstate for some of those Friday night games did not look, it wasn't a heavy downpour. You and I were watching 4 or 5 different games, and you wouldn't even have known it was raining if you didn't see the umbrellas. And so I don't think it rained the whole time. So that was good. Some teams still unbeaten: Caravel, Laurel, Charter, St. Mark's, Howard, St. Elizabeth, Middletown, if you don't count their out-of-state losses, losing again out in Ohio. I say again, they're now 0-2 out of state, as people suspected they would be. Winning their first game, First State Military Academy, with a 26-6 win over Christiana. Tower Hill beating Brandywine for their first win on the field. They've got a win over AI for the forfeit there. And Seaford in a shocker, and we'll talk more about this game, losing 21-20 to Indian River, losing their first game of what was just a wonderful, probably one of the best starts they've had since DuPont was there. I'll use the common theme. Since DuPont, after DuPont moved out, some of the winning streaks early in the season stopped for everybody. But Marty, let's start talking about this Appo entrance policy. Everybody knows, we talked about it last week, about the shooting incident outside of the gates. It has been confirmed that it was not anybody who was at the game. And so we've taken that off the plate. And so, and I don't want to rehash all of that, but what came about from that, as we suspected, they met the district, all 3 schools, Odessa, Middletown, Appoquinimink School District, and they came up with a new policy. And it's going to be interesting to see how it works, if it works, and whether it's kept. We've talked to a couple sources who have said, this policy will be reviewed, as all policies are. That's not breaking news. You make a policy and you review it, and it'll be reviewed at the end of the season. These same sources told us there's probably a very good likelihood that the Middletown Appo game will be played at high noon on Saturday next year, or 1 o'clock, or whatever. It will not be played in the dark. And I think that's a good thing. There's no reason for that not to happen, because they've had 2 years in a row, one at Middletown, one at Appo, where there has been an issue, whether it was game related or not, close enough to where people were impacted, that there was an issue. So why take that risk again? Hats off to Caesar Rodney and Dover High in particular, the host, for making sure that isn't going to happen in Dover when they host their big rivalry. So that they pulled that game off without any issues, from what I understand, yesterday. So, All right. So here's the new policy, and I'm going to read it so we get it right. Some people may have already seen this. Probably a lot of people heard there's a policy, but don't have the details. So here it is. And there's 2 home games left for Appoquinimink. Not sure about Middletown and Odessa, but it's for every home football game for the rest of the season. And they're all scheduled to be night games right now. I would assume this policy is going to stay the same. I don't think you would change it if, for whatever reason, a Friday night game gets rained out and you push it to Saturday. I think once you establish this policy, that's what it is. All right, so here it is for students. Only those students who attend the participating school may purchase a ticket. So it's the home team and the away team students. So if Middletown is playing Dover and you go to Smyrna, you're not coming. That's the policy. Tickets will be sold at school on Wednesdays and Thursdays. No tickets will be sold on Fridays. Reason for that is they've got to get themselves organized, and that'll make more sense when I run through the rest of this process. They need a day to get themselves organized for the Friday night game. Students must show student ID or proof of attendance. So what that means is if you didn't go to school Friday, you're not coming to the game Friday night. And that should be a rule anyway. They just have no way to enforce it, but now they are going to enforce it. When purchasing tickets and at the stadium gate. So in other words, you're not home from school sick and you pop into school to purchase tickets at the cafeteria on Friday or wherever they play. You're either in school or you're not. These guidelines apply to both the home and away teams. So the away teams have to do the same thing. Now, I didn't get into the nitty gritty with anybody about, are you showing student IDs when you check in? I guess that would probably have to be the case if you're the away team. I don't know. We'll talk. I don't want to get into the weeds yet. Let me continue. This is the rules for the guests. So that was just for the students. Here's for the guests. Each football player, cheerleader, and band member, the participants, and I would assume the head coaches, the managers, those people fall into this category as well. Get 5 tickets, 5 guests. So my son's in the band. He gets to purchase 5 tickets. Now, he must purchase those tickets at the school in advance by the game participant, my son who plays in the band, football player, cheerleader, everybody else. Tickets will be on the sale at the schools Wednesdays and Thursdays. No tickets will be sold on Fridays. Same policy, same reasons. Here's where it gets tricky. Each participant must submit the names of the individuals for whom they are purchasing tickets. So my son can't go up and said, I'm in the band, I'll take 5. It's got to be, I'll take 5, and here's who's coming.
Yep.
And then the spectators are required to check in at the stadium gate while presenting the tickets. So if Tyler buys a ticket for his godmother and she comes to the game, her name has to be on a list. She has to say that name in order to get in. So they're doing about as much as they can. They're one step shy of you've got to show proof of your military ID to get in, or your your driver's license. And so credit to them for not going that far. Now, again, there's nothing to say that if the person gives a ticket to somebody and say, just tell them you're this person.
Right.
They're probably going to get in. Look, they can only do so much.
There are some loopholes here.
There are some loopholes, but that's just the reality of it. Spectators are required to check in at the stadium gate while presenting tickets. So again, you got to be there. You got to check in. Here's your list of names. Any minors attending as a guest must remain with an adult during the game at all times. These guidelines apply to both home and away teams. Again, that's where it gets tricky for the away teams. They've got some additional game attendance guidelines: not permitted to bring book bags, backpacks, large bags into the stadium. That may have been a rule already, or should have been maybe, or certainly will be going forward. That one's not going to change. Here's an interesting one. Spectators are asked to remain seated in the bleachers during the game. Roaming around the stadium is not permitted.
Yeah, good luck enforcing this one.
Every stadium in the state, there's roaming.
Yeah,
it's not just by the kids. I roam at the games if I get bored.
Parents do it. They get nervous.
That's what I mean.
Absolutely.
Right. So, and I think they'll be reasonable with this.
I do too.
If I'm roaming around the stadium, just minding my own business, well, they may get me. I don't know. But
if they see a group of 10 kids doing it, they may
different
say,
story.
"Hey guys,
different story." All right, and this was a rule before this policy. Any minors, middle or elementary school must remain with an adult during the game at all times. That rule was created last year after the situation at Middletown in the Appo game with the mess they had under the bleachers and all that was going on. So some new rules, and then just a reinforcement of some old rules. Marty, my first, what, I'll let you react. You go ahead and then I'll pick up.
Well, when I first read this, the first thing that came to mind was this has one clear objective, and that is to keep kids that aren't affiliated with either school out of the stadium.
Right.
Now, you found out some information over the weekend. I found out some information about a different game where incidents happened that were determined by the administration that didn't involve kids from either school that were participating in those games. I'm guessing that's what led to this. Yeah. Excuse me. And I don't have any problem with it, because with the kids part of it, I should say, with the kids from other schools. The only place it's going to be an issue is you go to a Middletown game and you see all the cowbells and stuff like that. The first guy I thought of really was Robert Reed and his cowbell friends who go to the Middletown game.
Right.
Based on this, they may not get in. Most likely they won't get in. Unless they're on the list of a football player who puts them there.
Yep.
Now, the other loophole that I thought of is if you're a football player, let's say you only have one parent or whatever, and you want to give those other 4 to your friends who may attend a different school. Is that going to be monitored when those names are on there? Do you have to submit that this person is a student at St. Elizabeth's or Brandywine or Concord or whatever? So I get what they're trying to do, and I do like it. I do think it's funny because I don't think it's going to hurt attendance at all, because 5 tickets per player, cheerleader, and band member, depending upon the school, that's a heck of a lot of tickets.
Yeah.
You look at the Caesar Rodney Dover game yesterday, that probably would have filled Delaware Stadium with the rosters those schools have, if they all use those 5 tickets.
Right. Yeah.
So I do think that this is they needed to do something. And I think this was a good compromise to not allow, they didn't want to go back to that COVID situation where it was like 2 tickets per kid, and that they kind of want to leave it open. But clearly what they're trying to do is keep the kids who are coming to the game for nothing more than a social event from other schools out of that stadium. So the focus is on the kids who are playing, the parents, the siblings, whatever. So I actually didn't have a problem with this. The other thing I thought right off the bat was, and it's kind of cynical, but APA was so quick, and we ripped them last week for the statement. They were so quick to say this didn't happen on our property and it didn't involve anybody from the game. So the first thing they did was enact a policy that affects things that happen on their property and kids that go to their game, which is kind of, you bounce that around a little bit. You can go crazy thinking about the implications of that. But I do think this was a correct step. I will give them credit for that. I think they're trying to keep the element out of the games that aren't interested or aren't there just to see the game. And I think that's a good first step.
Yeah, I agree. They had to do something. They had to react in some way.
Yes.
They had to enforce and improve the security. Not that it was bad, but as I said last week, and people, it's not, it wasn't any great statement that I made. You learn about your systems when something goes wrong. Yep. As long as things are going right, you don't learn what you're doing wrong. And wrong might be you don't learn where you can improve. And that's what they did. And they said that in their statement. I didn't read the whole statement, but that's basically what they said. They realized there were some deficiencies and they wanted to address them. To answer your question about the student who goes to a different school, I think, and I was rereading this while you were talking, that so Smyrna's playing Dover, or Smyrna's playing Appoquinimink, and a kid from Dover wants to come and watch the game. They could be on a guest list.
Right.
And so now what you've also done is you've tracked it. So if my son buys 5 tickets, gives one to a friend who goes to a different school than the 2 that are playing, that kid gets in trouble. That's back on my family, basically. And I would imagine that I would hope we are no longer getting 5 tickets to give away if we're giving tickets to people who are not acting responsibly. It's kind of like when you sell your season tickets, or you sell your on StubHub, and the fan that you sold to or whatever, you're ultimately responsible, the season ticket holder. And so you lose the season tickets if some fan buys your tickets and acts like a moron. That's a good point.
Yeah. Yep.
So, but that also being said, that student who comes in, let's say it's a middle school student, they've got to be with an adult. So you're basically buying a ticket for your friend who's a middle school student. And unless your parent is going to be responsible for that person, they've got to bring a parent with them. So they've kind of allowed that. But your other point of Robert Reed not being able, the cowbell gang not being able to go is perfectly true. So, now Middletown, Appo, when they came here, they would be there with, bells are ringing normally. May not be in 2 years when that game comes back in to Appoquinimink. But what it's also done, I'm thinking selfishly, Marty, I got some neighbors who want to go. I can start scalping tickets. I'll take 5, Tyler. Here's the names you want to put down. And I'll be selling them for $50 a piece. Not just kidding.
The other complaint I heard was I got 2 notes from coaches this past week that said, so we can no longer go and scout these teams in person.
I think coaches have a pass. I think they'll have a pass.
They do. The only thing that wasn't addressed, and I did respond that I said, you need to contact the school because coaches usually do, like the media have some kind of pass to get into these games. I assume that stuff would still be on. You're not going to turn away an adult who's there to scout your team that's playing next week.
But it's going to be interesting. The lines are going to be interesting, Marty. This isn't the NFL where there's 10 different ways to get in, or Delaware Stadium where I was on Saturday, where there's 8 different gates you can get in. There's only one gate going in all these stadiums, one gate. And if you got to check off names, there is no quick way to do that. I've been doing this for Special Olympics for 33 years. You have 500 people sign up who are coming in, and you've got to check them off and not just own a ticket. There is no quick way to do that.
No.
There is no quick way to do that, no matter what.
And
I
thought if Abyssinia or St. Mark's were to institute this policy with the traffic problems around those areas,
yeah,
the lines that would start to form there. I mean, you and I have seen St. Mark's games, 45 minutes into the game, those lines are still coming up. The headlights are still coming up the hill to find parking spots. So
yeah,
it's going to be interesting to see how this works. There were no incidents that we heard of this week, which was the first time these schools were used.
Yeah.
I know Middletown was home, I believe, correct? Middletown was on the road. So we were, I think Odessa was the only team that was home. And of course, I didn't hear of any issues there. So I hope it does have the desired effect. And I hope that people are not going to be too put out, the fans, the alumni that want to come to the games. But it's important to point out too, and I know it's not the same, but all three of these schools are showing every one of their home games live for free on YouTube on their sites. So it's kind of a good trade-off.
And again, we both agreed that they had to do something. They had to take a step, and they took a step. And there's, is it a step too far? Time will tell. If this goes flawlessly and there's not a huge number of complaints, because, the people you and I are talking about, Marty, my neighbor who loves to go watch the games. Yeah. I got one neighbor who loves to go watch the games. None of the other neighbors are going to Appoquinimink High School unless their kids in the band, playing on the field, or involved in the game in some way. Right. They're not going. That's just the reality, especially when the games are on TV. And so, I think 5 tickets is generous. That takes care of every family member practically. And again, enough people know enough people that if grandma, grandpa, and 14 cousins are coming to the game, you can rally up places to get tickets. And I would also think, and I would hope, if there's a special case, that the schools will work with whoever that is, because that's going to be a case of, hey, look, my grandmother's in town. Yes. We want to make this a family thing, but we need 7 tickets. I can almost guarantee you the athletic directors at those 3 schools, don't quote me on this, are going to figure out how to make that happen.
We're pretty sure grandma's not going to stir up any stuff at the game.
And she's not going to be able to figure out how to get on YouTube, most likely, and watch the game. So let's get her at the stadium where she belongs. So anyway, hats off to the Appoquinimink School District. It was quick. It was decisive. It was well put together, sending out the rules and all of that to the families and how it was going to work. It's very clear what you need to do. The next home game, my son who's a band member, needs to go in, and he needs to purchase 5 tickets, and he has to have a list of who's coming in, whether it's family, friends, godparents, moms, dads, aunts, uncles, or whatever it is. And that's the way it is. And then it'll be a test, and we'll report back, because I'll see it unfold at the next Appoquinimink home game, because I'm there as the PA announcer. So I'll see that happen, and we'll get reports. And here's the last thing: if you're listening to this and you're going to any games in the Appoquinimink School District, parents, please be patient. Yeah. Remember that they are doing this. The big cry out on social media when the incident happened last Friday night was, our poor kids have to go through this. They shouldn't have to go through this. They shouldn't have to face this kind of, things in their head when they're going to a game. Yep. So what the Appoquinimink School District has done, folks, is they've taken steps to help alleviate the stress and alleviate the possibilities of this happening again. So they've taken the right step by doing something. Right. What they've done will be determined whether it works or not. And they're the first ones who have already said, this will be evaluated. It may be evaluated after the first Friday night home game in the Appoquinimink School District. If there's 400 people in line till the end of the first quarter, that's a red flag. Yep. And then I bet they get back together and figure out, okay, maybe we need to pay and open up the side gates and have 3 places that people can answer. There's plenty of gates to get into the stadium. They just don't open them because they don't have a need to open them. Right. This might be a situation where they need to open them. They'll make that decision. So we'll end it with hats off to the Appoquinimink School District for making a move to make it safer and to make it more, for us parents especially, a little bit more safe in our heads that our kids are going somewhere where it's a safe place. Yep. And I hope it works. And if it does work, I hope other districts go in that direction. Me too. I do want to say Smyrna did institute a new policy this week too. It's not near as restrictive as the Appo School District is, but it's the same thing. Children 14 and under must be accompanied by an adult. This is interesting. No outside sports equipment is allowed in. You always see kids playing football or something like that off to the side. I like that. Yeah, and that will no longer be allowed. This is interesting too. The stadium will be split for home and away fans.
your ticket at Smyrna will now be marked with a QR code that will be scanned, and you will be told what side of the stadium to sit on.
I like that too.
I don't think there's any problem with that either.
Nope.
I think DMA did something like this similar. They started doing it last year where they tried to make sure they kept the crowds separate, because let's face it, if you listen to some of these live streams, crowds can get pretty agitated.
Right.
You start putting both fan bases together, that's not that's not something you want to get into. They're also going to have an increased law enforcement presence at the games, and they're increasing lighting, including places like under the bleachers and places where in the past you might have been able to kind of scoot away and do whatever. So Smyrna's doing some different things. It's one admittance to the game per ticket. If you leave halftime, whatever, you cannot come back in. So again, they're trying to do some different things too. And I think some of these schools are going to play around with different things. They're going to come up with different ideas, and hopefully some of them share the successes, the failures, and they get this together. But just to end it again, I kudos to the schools for doing something. Because they really had to, especially with the shooting in Philadelphia last week. It was one of those things where, you know what, this is going to continue to escalate until something really bad happens. So hats off to them for making some changes.
Yeah, it's the step that they take before just saying we're done with playing night games. And
Yes.
nobody wants to see that. But
No.
as I we had some people reach out to us, and I talked to some people offline. You know what? I'm not sure I'm going to send my kid to night games anymore.
I know.
And not just in the Apo district where this
Right,
one incident
right.
happened, or Apocinity, just in general. Why,
Yep.
why run that risk? And like you said, Marty, games are on TV, not the same,
Exactly.
but it is what it is. All right,
Yep.
we're going to move on to football now. But first, this day and age, we all think our iPhones are great cameras. That is until you see a team photo, individual portrait, or an action shot taken using a professional camera, and more importantly, a pro behind the lens. Andre Smith of Andre L Photography takes unbelievable sports photos. I've seen them. You can see them on his website at www.andrel, that's EL, photography.com. Whether you're looking for a league or a team photo day that you're in charge of, whether you want an individual portrait session, sort of like a senior photo, but doesn't need to be a senior, or game day action shots, trust me, Andre Smith is the man you want behind the lens. He's a former pro, not a pro, he is a pro, former professional photojournalist with the News Journal, still does some work for them, I think, and a lot of other media outlets. Just a great guy too. You'll love working with him as he works with your kid, whether, again, he can come and take a whole bunch of action shots at the game, come to your house and take photos, whatever you want. That's Andre L, E-L, photography.com. And if you're interested in being a sponsor of the show or a segment of the show, or just to have an ad read like we just did, reach out to us on either Twitter or Facebook. Our Twitter handle is at DELHS Football, and our Facebook page is the DELHS Football Pod. Reach out to either Marty or I, and we can let you know. We got packages that are built and designed and priced for local people who run their own business or have small businesses here. So feel free to reach out to us. All right, let's go to the football field. Let's start with Smyrna and Sussex Central. This was the Class 3 battle. Smyrna has put their footprint on the fact that they are probably the team to beat in District 2 of Class 3 with a 22-0 win over Sussex Central. Smyrna is now 2-0 in Class 3. Sussex Central 0-1 in Class 3. Ymir Knight, 3 touchdowns. Quarterback Brian Wright seemed to see like he started feeling more comfortable in the pocket than he has in the past. Marty, there was a difference of 350 yards on offense in this game when it was all said and done. Just, usually you say the score wasn't as bad as it looked. I'm going to say the score wasn't as wide of difference in margins as it seemed that these two teams were.
Yeah, it Sussex Central just never seemed to be in this. Smyrna, to me, they just lived in the Sussex Central backfield the entire game. Their defense, and this looked like the defense we saw during their championship seasons. They had the explosive offense, which they don't have right now, but they have this defense that is going to allow them to well, you allow 0 points, you're going to beat anybody. But this is what we expected to see from them, a little more explosiveness on offense. Ymir Knight, of course, they're using him all over the place. And I saw the quote where Mike Judy said his position is dude. He's just the dude, and he plays everywhere and does anything he wants. The only thing I would say is, and I put this on Twitter, I'm like, my God, Smyrna, please just start punting the football when it's time to punt.
They never punt.
You could make the argument that it cost them the Middletown game. They had one blocked, and it became the first touchdown of the game for Middletown. Yeah. They had one messed up this weekend, and I understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to keep the defense honest. But by the time the ball gets back to Ymir Knight to punt, the whole team, the whole defense is back in the backfield. So that'd be my 2 cents I would throw in there for them. But this was a great effort. Knight, as you said, 11 carries, 70 yards, 4 catches for 38 yards. I thought that what I heard last week was against Caesar Rodney. Brian Wright really started to put it together. Now, we talked about it last week. It was a perfect game for him to do that because let's face it, Caesar Rodney is down. They were shut out again this weekend. And it seems to have worked. He looked a lot more confident. Some of his throws were off a bit, but I thought overall he's getting it. He's starting to fall into place there with the offense. And if they're able to use him the way they've used quarterbacks in the past, it just makes that team so much more dangerous. Right. If you can get Ymir Knight, Markel Holman out on the edges, and Holman 24 carries, 126 yards. They probably have the best 1-2 punch in the state in that backfield. It's just if they can really get going, and when you have the defense playing the way they did this weekend, where, gosh, there were times when the quarterback for Sussex Central was handing off, and there were already 2 Smyrna defenders in the backfield to meet him. It was just an amazing performance. It was Smyrna's 3rd defensive shutout of the season. And this is funny. I got this from Andy Walter, Beta Bay News. Sussex Central has been shut out twice since 2014. Both of those are by Smyrna, and they each happened in each of the last 2 years. Yeah. So 2nd year in a row that Smyrna has shut out Sussex Central. This is the Smyrna, and I agree with you. Last week, I kind of made the argument that you could say Dover was that team, and they still could be, but I think Smyrna stamped themselves this week against a very quality opponent. Right. And the shutout, the little more explosiveness in offense, this is a Smyrna we thought we were going to see, and they're definitely, to me, the number 1 team right now.
And the reason this game was as close as it was, 22 points being close compared to what I think it could have been, the way the yardage difference was, is because Sussex Central is a solid defensive team.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep. Very solid defensive team. You know, they're probably not in this game at all. Probably running clock if they're average, but they're not. They're above average. It's the offense that struggles. And, you know, I look back at their 4 games, Marty. They've played 4 teams, 2 who will definitely make the playoffs, Sally's and Smyrna. In those games, they've got a combined 7 points on offense. Yep. The 2 teams that they've scored all the points against, 39 and 54, William Penn and Hodson, both on the fence, maybe on the outside looking in come playoff time, yet to be determined. Right. And so when they play against a tough defense and a tough team, they struggle on offense. That wing tee that they run, other teams have been able to figure it out and pick it up. And so it'll be interesting to see going forward. Sussex Central goes to Milford on Thursday. Why those 2 are still playing, I'm not sure. They shouldn't be, but that's going to be a Thursday night game. Milford is 2-2 now after a 2-0 start. And so that's where Sussex Central is heading. Smyrna hosts St. George's on Friday. I would have picked that early in the season as a game to go to. Not so much anymore after what I saw on Saturday. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But let's go to DMA McCain. DMA with a 27-14 win. They've now rattled off 3 straight wins after an 0-2 start. Of course, one of those losses, the forfeit to Howard, the game they were losing anyway. McCain, opposite, 3-0 start. Now they've lost 2 in a row. It's 14-6. DMA in the lead at halftime, 20-6 after DMA scores and on their first possession in the second half. And then it was 27-6 with 3:02 left. So, Marty, these are 2 teams both heading in different directions.
They are. And when this started, I really thought McCain had a chance to take this game. They got off to the same start that Hodgson did a few weeks back, where for the first couple series, they couldn't get a snap from here to there without it hitting the ground or going over the quarterback's head or turning the ball over or having some kind of a misplay on offense. They just could not get anything going. And the thing that was interesting in the first quarter, there were 3 times I counted where McKeevis Rogers had guys wide open that had blown past DMA, cornerback, safeties, whatever. 2 of the times, believe it or not, he overthrew the receivers, which the kid has a cannon for an arm. And the other time he had 2 receivers kind of running a seam route, and it dropped in between them. Neither one kind of decided I'm going to go for this. So there were opportunities early on for McCain to get in this game. Then DMA starts to control the ball. They start rolling. BJ Aline, now that he's back healthy, looks really good. 73 yards, 5-yard TD scored. He had a 34-yard touchdown catch from Odell Teal. And he had an interception that stopped the McCain drive. Right. So he did a little bit of everything. I think McCain still has an opportunity. They're going to have to steal some wins here and there, but they've got to right the ship quickly because, as you said, these are two teams going in opposite directions. DMA kind of looked like they may be left for dead a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden they're getting that offense rolling again. Their defensive intensity is ramping up, and they look like a strong contender once again.
They've both got plenty of time to figure it out. If you're McCain, they're off next week. Then they play Del Castle. DMA also off, and they got Malvern Prep, and that's going to be a tough one for DMA there. So plenty of time to figure out what they need to do in their next games. All right, Sussex Tech, Lake Forest. This was one of the more exciting games of the night. Sussex Tech pulls out a 33-30 win. Homecoming at Sussex Tech. They're now 2-3. They handed Lake their first loss, and it was interesting. I watched a lot of the clips from this. I was watching this game, but I flipped off of it and was watching 3 other games at the same time. Here were some of the features in the game. Lake fumbled a punt on the 2-yard line. While you're fielding a punt on the 2-yard line is the first question. Fumbled it right into the end zone, turned into a Sussex Tech touchdown. And then Lake scored with under 2 minutes left. Onside kick. They recover it, but then the Tech defense held and they just ran out of time. And Marty, so this was one of the more exciting games. Lake getting their first loss. Sussex Tech, what a way to celebrate homecoming. They looked like a team. It was almost like I felt like a must win for them to have a shot at the playoffs because they're now 2-3. They would have been 1-4.
And I'll be honest, I didn't think they had any shot in this game. Lake Forest had been playing great. Sussex Tech had been getting blown out. This was a phenomenal effort. And I watched a good bit of this game too. I turned it off late. Because it looked like Sussex Tech was going to come away with the win. But then, as you said, the Lake late touchdown, the onside kick, it got really interesting there at the end. But Jaron Sample has been the guy for Sussex Tech all year, 3 touchdowns. As you said, it was homecoming, which I think has something to do with it. They had a large fan turnout out there. And Lake Forest, I got the feeling watching it early on anyway, that maybe they looked past Sussex Tech a bit. Again, Sussex Tech had really been struggling. So this was a huge win for Sussex Tech, as you said, to stay in the playoff picture, stay relevant. It's their first win in the district, but it still, places them squarely among the contenders for a playoff spot. So this, I agree 100%. This was a must win.
All right. Both these teams travel north on Saturday. Sussex Tech goes to Brandywine. Brandywine's coming off a loss to Mount Pleasant. Lake Forest goes to Newark. Newark's coming off a win against Del Castle. So I think it's always tough, Marty, when you are downstate and you got to get up on Saturday morning and head north. In an even game, I always give the advantage to the home team in that particular case because they're getting up, going through their normal morning routine at home. All right. Speaking of Saturday games, one of the Hurricane Ian games that they weren't sure they weren't going to have. I actually talked to athletic director Chris Mascara. I think it was on Thursday. And he told me, you know what, we're just going to keep it on the schedule. And if we have to cancel Saturday morning, we canceled Saturday morning. They had the advantage of nobody was traveling far. It was Appo at St. George's. So you're talking about a 5-mile bus ride. And so it's not like you got to get up at 7 a.m. and be on a bus to head north. Like Lake and Sussex Tech are going to be doing next week. So right decision. I decided to go. I grabbed my 2 boys and said, let's go to the football game. And we went, and the weather, as I said at the beginning of the show, it was ideal for me other than a little windy because it was overcast and it was right at that 68, 69 degree weather between shorts and long pants, which means I'm in shorts and a hoodie. And so it was a great, great atmosphere for me. Fans, I was impressed with the fans. There has just as many Appo fans as there were St. George's fans probably. And not a lot of students, which I kind of didn't expect, right. with the weather the way it was. It certainly wasn't a beautiful day to go to a football game. I tell you, Marty, Appo won 21-7. Huge, 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 huge game for Appo. They're one of these teams. You look at their schedule. They still have to face Sally's. They still have to face Smyrna. They've got some games on their schedule that they're going to have to play out of their minds to win, and they know that. And so it's not anything that somebody's going to say, wow, how can you say that? That's just the reality of it, no matter who's playing those teams. And so, Appo with the 21-7 lead win in the end, it was the fastest first half in Delaware high school football history, Marty. It was almost halftime at 12:30, it felt like. And nobody threw a pass. Appo threw 2 passes the whole game. My son told me there was a joke among some of the kids that, they bet that nobody exchanges cash and the kids can afford to do that. Well, the over under on passing, how many passes Appo would throw was 2.5. You know what it was? 2. My kid took the over. and I told him, I said, if they were trailing, there would have been more than 2.5, but they weren't trailing. So there was no reason to run the ball. And they had Daniel McConomy in the background. So it was just, and St. George's didn't throw until the final drive when they had to, when they were trying to score quickly, they started throwing the ball. They probably didn't throw 2 passes up until that point for whatever reason. So it just was the way it was. But it wasn't a lopsided game by any stretch of the imagination. I actually felt the game was being played between the two 40-yard lines at one point. It just felt nobody could get past the 40. They'd pick up a first down and then be forced to punt, pick up a first down or not pick it up and whatever. And so, but the story of the game again was Daniel McConomy. He had 2 touchdowns, 4 yards, 20 yards. Ethan Osebu, the Swift wide receiver, he had a 5-yard touchdown just to mix things up a little bit. But McConomy, you texted me, has he reached 30 yet in the first half? And he might have. I wasn't keeping track. I probably should have, but he carried the ball a lot. They did mix it up more than they have. And what they did is they were direct snapping to him. They were wildcatting quite a bit. And so that was a little bit different. They already know he's getting the ball.
Exactly.
That completely eliminates having to guess who's getting the ball. And you know what? Hats off to the Apple offensive line. He still was able to pick up yards. He's just a good runner. He's a solid runner. And I was talking to somebody who said, one of the reasons he probably doesn't get as beat up as you would think is because he's so quick and he only gets hit once. And, and then he either goes down or he gets away.
Right.
And he's not one of these rumble tumble guys who's going up the middle and he's got 800 pounds on top of him when he finally hits the ground. Very rarely are guys on top of him when he hits the ground, especially when he runs around the end. So it was just, it was a great win for Appo. St. George's, Marty, I can't figure out. They're 1-4. And, we were talking about them in the top 3 or 4 weeks ago. And, and I love John Wilson. Everybody, if you listen to the show, that he's a great guy and he's a great coach. And I would have my kid play for him in a heartbeat. And they just haven't been able to figure out, I thought this would be the year they'd have it and be able to get over that hurdle and get up in those top 3. And it's just not happening. And, so, I actually want to reach out and talk to them about it because, there may be a reason we don't know about, and that's just the reality of it. We see what happens on the field. We don't have insights into things that are happening in the program, but it's a great program with great kids. And that's another, I have a neighbor, it's one of the wide receivers, Braden Fields, and he's a sophomore and he's a wide receiver, went to school there because he wants to be a nurse. He's a great athlete. His brother, Javon, was an all-state player at Apple, went on to play down at Towson and another Division I school. And so it's a school with great kids. I have another neighbor that goes there. And so, it's just a good school when they just haven't been able to pull the football thing off yet. Right. And I think they're right on that brink. And I thought this year they'd be over that fence and just not there, 1-4. And, the reality of it is now they've played tough teams. They've played, they've played some big teams. Appo might be considered one of the lesser teams they've played. And so, they still have a shot to, win some games here. And I hope they do it for the sake of everything. But I know you were watching a game at home.
What I was going to say first was I'm glad the weather at the game was okay. Judging by the live stream, you would thought it was a Category 5 hurricane because it kept crapping out every 5 seconds, which is always, I know I heard from Mike Lang, who's also said that when they broadcast from there, it's so difficult to keep a strong signal. So for whatever reason, it was kind of off and on. But
my phone signal was, that's why I wasn't tweeting
not
much.
Good.
No, not good. So certainly live stream is not going to be.
And the one thing I noticed every time it did come on was that McConomy was getting the ball, and I was talking to somebody, it might have been my brother, and I said, he keeps 46 carries last week. I'm certain he was in the neighborhood of anywhere from 30 to 40 this week. Mm-hmm. I keep picturing him at the end of the game looking like Apollo Creed at the end of the Rocky movie. The kid is just, they're running him into the ground because they can't do anything else right now. They just are not able to do anything with the pass for one reason or another. But I also found out, and this is, and by the way, this kid, the McConomy is phenomenal. He did it against Middletown last week. They knew he was getting the ball every play, and he still gashed them over and over and over. The nickname they have for him is Run DMC, which is awesome. The Appo had that all over Twitter yesterday, and I jokingly put on there, I haven't been as excited as for Run DMC as since I saw Die Hard in the movie theater and Christmas in Hollis started playing during Argyle's limo scene. So I love the nickname. It's got to be one of the best in Delaware. I think this, again, I agree with you, a huge win for Appoquinimink. You look, St. George's and Hodgson are both 0-2 in the district already. For Appo to get to 1-1 right now, put themselves in that top 4, which again, it's only the top 3 in each of the districts for Class 3, but they're going to put themselves, this win ensures that they're going to at least put themselves in a position to compete for one of those at-large spots if they can't climb into that top 3, because the only team above them is William Penn. And William Penn's another one of those teams like St. George's. You just never know what you're going to get
Right.
from week to week.
Yep.
So very competitive, this District 1 in Class 3. I was looking at this yesterday, and you mentioned it earlier about the offense for Sussex Central. There's not one team right now in 3A District 1 that is averaging more than 18 points a game, which is incredible considering the firepower, Sally's, Middletown, Appoquinimink with McConomy, Hodgson, the way they lit it up the first week. So these teams are really starting to knock each other off, and the defenses at this level are really starting to dial in. And they're kind of shutting down some of these offenses, with the exception of a kid like McConomy. But when they start playing some of the heavy hitters, they're going to have to find some other way, even if it's a different way to get him the ball out on the edge, the screen passes, whatever, something like you said, the Wildcat they did this weekend. But yeah, agreed. Huge win for Appoquinimink. St. George's, boy, back to the drawing board. You're kind of scratching your head as to what's going on there. Again, still have time. Season's not over. Though you get into that you get your third loss in the district, which, St. George's and Hodgson is one away from that, you're in trouble. So St. George is going to have to figure this out in a hurry, but a huge win for Appoquinimink.
All right, so let's look at Appoquinimic's remaining schedule. In the district, they have William Penn, winnable.
Yep.
Hodgson, winnable. And Sally's. If you're a betting man, again, I'm a big Appo fan. Obviously, my kids go there. I'm probably given I'd need a lot of points to take if that's going to be the case.
I agree.
But again, where you're talking about where the index is going to happen, if you're not in the top 3 and it comes down to the indexing, here's their out of state or out of district games: at Dover, very difficult.
Yep.
At Cape Henlopen, I'd like their chances a lot more if it was at Appo against Cape Henlopen, and Smyrna. So if you're Appoquinimink, if you're Brian Timpson, your goal was to be in that top 3.
Yes.
And that's what you're telling your team. Look, if we're not in the top 3 in the district, because if that's not the case, you've probably also either lost to William Penn, Hodgson, or Sally's.
Yep.
You may be on the outside looking in there. And so I think that becomes your goal. If you're St. George's, here's what they've got left in the district: Hodgson, winnable; Middletown, again, if you're a betting man, and William Penn,
right,
winnable. So they could still come out 2-1 in the district. So they're not out of it yet either. They're out of district games: Smyrna, if you're a betting man; Sussex Central, who knows which team's going to show up for both those teams. It's down at Sussex. No, it's at home against St. George's. So again, like I just said, if it's an even game, I'm going with a home team. That would be on a Saturday when a team's coming from downstate, which that would be the case. And at Cape Henlopen, again, up, who knows? So here's the one thing: it's going to be exciting. That's what this class system has done. It's made it exciting because, let's face it, 2 years ago, without this class system, St. George's season's over.
Yep.
Appoquinimic's seasons might be over given their schedule, because there's only
you get 2 losses
that make it. Right.
Yeah, you get 2 losses and you're in serious trouble.
Right.
Overall, forget the district.
Yeah.
Now with the district play, you're saying, if I'm Appo, if I can go 2-3 in District 1, I'm feeling pretty good about my chances. Even if you lose all 3 of those out of district games, we saw last year some crazy records are getting into the playoffs, but that's the way the system is set up if you're going to go by the district games. So if you go 2-3 in your Appo, I think you're pretty safe.
Yeah. And I was talking to Ken Anderson, the head coach at Red Lion, on yesterday morning. They start out 0-2 in Division 2 years ago. You're done.
You're done.
You get 2 losses. You're pretty much done. And when you start out 0-2, your season's over. Not the case now. I want to give a shout out to Kwame Miller. He had a 90-yard kickoff return for St. George's.
Yes.
And Marty, it couldn't have come at a better time. Appo goes up 14-0. If he doesn't run that back, that game might have been way over by then.
Oh, yeah.
Not that, and Appo, to their credit, came back and scored again pretty quickly, but just a huge kickoff return by Kwame Miller. Not sure if Appoquinimink intentionally kicked the ball to a spot where he could field it or not, but here's a warning to other teams: don't want to kick it to Kwame Miller. All right, let's go to our quick comment section that we've been doing. And actually, Marty, I want to make sure I didn't miss a game here. I got myself reorganized here. Nope, I got them all.
Nope, yep,
I put 2 games on one sheet. Want to make sure that wasn't the case. All right, so we're going to go to our quick comment section. This is where we think a game was interesting, surprising, what have you. and then we will go to our players' games. And these are just meant to be quick comments, not a whole lot of detail. Marty, Odessa, 42, early college, high school, 0. And I'm going to let you give the stat because you tweeted it out about how Odessa has done in their last 3 games, and they are 3-0 in the district. Pretty much playoff bound.
Absolutely.
Yep.
They are. They've outscored their last 3 opponents 93-0. They are on a serious roll. Now, you could talk about the level of competition, but let's face it. You got to go out there and play the game, and you play who you're up against. So,
and they got no seniors.
Exactly. And this is again, freshman, sophomore, and junior, 3-1 overall, but 3-0 in the district. Definitely playoff bound. And it's interesting. It's a good thing they are, because listen to this remaining schedule: Caravel, Laurel, Polytech, Red Lion, Seaford, Sussex Tech. There's not an easy game in there for an Odessa team. So last year they made the playoffs at 3-7. I'm not saying that'll happen again this year, but it's a possibility. Right. And you know what? They will have earned it because they won their district games, which is the way it's
all you got to do.
Yep.
All right. So they play Caravel, as you mentioned. So they're going to be tested. Caravel going to be tested. Caravel's 4-0, and they haven't exactly played the Mount Rushmore of high school teams,
they haven't.
With all due respect to all their opponents.
Yes.
They've done what they're supposed to do, win the games that are on your schedule, and they've done that, and they've done it rather easily. All right, this was a surprise. Delmar 41, Woodbridge 14. So Delmar starts out 0-2. They're now 2-2. Woodbridge is 1-3. Their lone win coming against Sussex Tech, which didn't look like a big deal at all. Maybe a little bit bigger of a deal now after Sussex Tech wins. This game was 27-14 at the half. 0 passing yards for Woodbridge. Not a complete shock. They're not a passing team.
No.
You know what, Marty? But what stuck out to me? Delmar looks big. Now I'm watching on my big screen TV. That's the main game I got on, and I got games on every other electronic device I own in this house. They look big. They look bigger. I mean, it almost looked like a varsity against a JV team purely in the size standpoint. It's the first time I've seen Delmar play live or on TV, and they just look big, and they look big in every position. And maybe it's my eyes, maybe it's my TV distortion, but I mean, they just look big to me. But I was shocked that they won as easily as they did over what we know is a well-coached Woodbridge team by Marvin Dooley.
Yeah, I was surprised at how they, and this may go to the size aspect, but how they dominated both sides of the line of scrimmage. Woodbridge, again, they must have lost far more than we ever thought they did to graduation, because it has just been a nightmare season down there. For Delmar, this is, it's great. They're right back in the hunt here. They are 2-1 in the district. There are 7 teams in District 3 in 2A. 5 of those teams have at least 1 win, 5 have at least 1 loss. So we've said this last year, this is probably the toughest district top to bottom in all of the class systems. So a big win here. I really thought Woodbridge was going to get back on track here, or if they were going to do it, this was the game they were going to do it in. But again, 2 teams going in opposite directions again. Delmar just looked fantastic, and Woodbridge, it's back to the drawing board.
All right, next game, Indian River and Seaford. Indian River with a 21-0 lead over Seaford, hands Seaford their first loss. And Marty, that was kind of the news of the weekend, is Seaford losing this game, their first loss. We're not sure when the last time was Seaford started out 4-0. I jokingly said, I think at the beginning of the broadcast, it was back when DuPont was still in town, since that's kind of what everybody judges everything. But I'm also looking at Seaford's schedule as we speak.
Yep.
At Colonel Richardson, we don't know anything about them.
No.
At Tower Hill, we know about Tower Hill. At Southern, don't know anything about them. At Polytech, again, 4 teams that very well could all be in the lower portion of Class 1 if they all played in Delaware, or are in the lower portion. And so, again, nothing against Seaford. Again, like we just said, you win the games that are on your schedule, and that's what they've done. Congratulations to them. We hope Seaford's sports program is building up. Their basketball team had a great season last year, and hopefully the football season will help keep kids in Seaford and coming out for sports. I don't think those Seaford kids go anywhere necessarily, but coming out and wanting to be excited about sports. So this was a big win for Indian River as well.
This was huge, to keep them in the mix again. Last year, I believe they lost during the regular season 14-13 to St. Elizabeth. So they were one of the top contenders. It looked like they really got off to a rough start. They're now 2-2 overall, 1-1 in the district. This was everyone and their brother was picking Seaford in this game. Now, someone direct messaged me, and I don't know this to be a fact, but according to what they told me was Seaford scored late and decided to go for 2 and the win. Now, if I'm wrong, somebody can point that out. But if that is what happened, I don't have any problem with that. I kind of like Mark Quillen rolling the dice there and going for that. Either way, it's in the long run, maybe not the worst thing in the world for Seaford. Nobody thought they were going to go undefeated,
right?
And maybe they refocus here. And same thing for IR. This was a huge win for them to get back into the playoff picture. So it looks like a well played game by two teams that are both going to be in the mix.
All right, Charter of Wilmington 28-7 over St. Andrews. Marty, you want to talk about this? Charter of Wilmington 4-0. That doesn't happen if there's not a Class 3 system.
No, and
I've three-class system.
Yeah, I've tweeted this a ton of times. I think they're one of the teams that has really run with the opportunity given them in the realignment system. The way they've engaged the students, the community, the support. They had a great turnout for this game yesterday in adverse conditions. 4-0, 3-0 in the district. So basically they're locked in to the playoffs again for the second year in a row. 4 interceptions for the defense yesterday. First 4-0 start for Charter since 2010.
Wow.
Which means that some of these kids were not even in kindergarten yet when that happened. The defense has allowed only 32 points in 4 games. And before somebody says, well, they've given up 34. Yes, but 2 were safety that the offense gave up. So 32 points in 4 games. St. Andrews was a real challenger last year. It's sort of back to the drawing board. They lost a ton of talent from last season and Charter took advantage of it. It was kind of a methodical victory, but a big one. It keeps them undefeated. And we'll talk about the undefeated teams a little bit later, but the excitement generated at Charter with this class system it's really fun to watch.
Well, and what it's going to do now, Marty, is there were probably, I'm going to say, let's say there's 5 football players over the past 10 years that qualified, got into the Charter School of Wilmington and didn't go there because of the football program, because they had no shot to win a state championship. Because remember, this is a Charter School of Wilmington team that played in Division I until they pulled themselves out. They didn't get kicked out because of enrollment. They were supposed to be in Division I, and they basically removed themselves for safety reasons. Is what they said, and so there had to have been some football players who wanted to go to school at Charter School of Wilmington, but wanted to play football at a competitive level. And so didn't go there. And so this is going to change that, because right now you've got to think that they're one of the top 4 teams in Class 2, which means you got a shot to win a state championship. If the ball rolls in the right direction against the right team at the right time, getting the playoffs is the first thing.
So, Class 1 for Charter. Class 1.
Class 1. Yep. All right. So let's move on to our top performances. This is where we pick a team, a unit, a group of people, what have you, for a top performance. I'm going to start, Marty, because I already told you who mine was, so I know you didn't pick them. I'm going to talk about the freshman backfield. 3 guys for Red Lion in their big win over Milford, 39-0. But this is what's amazing is these guys have been the stars in all their games, and they're only freshmen. And I'm talking about the quarterback, Evan Budinger. He was 3 of 7 for 112 yards for a touchdown. The fullback, Jack Wilson, 9 of 19 for a touchdown. And the halfback, Malik Pinkett, 9 carries, 105 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And Ken Anderson, I was talking to him on the phone Saturday morning, and he was saying a lot of people are comparing them to Eric Dickerson and Roger Craig at SMU. And I said, well, the good news is, Coach, I know exactly what you're talking about. And the bad news is I know exactly what you're talking about because I'm as old as I am. If you remember SMU before they went on probation, you're old. And that puts you, me, and
Pony
Coach
Express
Anderson
back then.
in that category. Right? And I said to him, I said, they're listed on Max Preps in their stats. They're listed as running backs. I said, you're making it sound like one's kind of a sleek runner and the other guy's a bull. He said, yep, one's a fullback and one's a halfback. And that's how we roll. And so also want to shout out, he's not in the backfield, but wide receiver Ja Rogers. And Coach said he's just a special player, also a freshman. He had a big catch on one of the drives down there. And so Red Line, the backfield for them and their wide receiving core, the future is bright if they all stay at Red Line. And there's no reason to think they're not. They're back on the roll now, 2-2.
And my first top performance unit, it's funny, we always think around the same lines. I'm sticking with Red Lion because this week they kicked what I believe to be the longest field goal in Delaware this year. It was 46 yards. The field goal unit, Sam Crossan, who kicked the field goal, Carter Raisin, the long snapper, and Seth McGurty, the holder. And those guys, it was just a phenomenal effort from them. But the weather looked awful. The ground was slick as heck.
Mm-hmm.
And the field goal was good from 46. If you look at the replay, it looks like it would have been good from about 46 and 2 inches. It barely got over the thing, but you know what? It was great. That's right. It was high in the air. It was just a great effort. You and I have always said it takes 3 guys to kick a field goal. And to hit a 46-yarder in that weather, I thought was great. So hats off to the Red Line field goal unit.
Yeah, somebody, Amy Hoff, she's a friend of the show. She calls in, she's a friend of my family's too. And she sent me a video this morning and said, is this the guy you were talking about? Because I said to her yesterday, I saw her on the sideline. She takes video for her and her husband take the video and pictures for Appoquinimec. So I was talking to her on the sideline. I said, yes, somebody kicked the field goal we were talking about. And I couldn't remember the kid's name. So anyway, she sent me a video late last night and said, is this the kid you were talking about? And it was Sam Cross. And she said, I think he deserves a shout out.
There you go.
I said, I've already got him on my top performers, which we'll talk about in a second. I won't repeat it, but it's glad that you brought that up. Do you have any other top performances, Marty, before we go on?
I do. For the second week in a row, I think the Appo offensive line, everybody knows McConomy is getting the ball. And if he doesn't get it, they know somebody else in the backfield is running the ball. They're not throwing it. That offensive line continues to just kind of pin their ears back and drive forward. And they are just road grading over some of these teams. So I really think that when everybody knows what you're going to do and you're still able to do it successfully, that deserves a shout out. So the Appo offensive line, those 5 guys, and I wish I had each of their names, but are doing a great job. Last week included against a really good Middletown team.
Yeah, they've had a good season in every game because McConomy's been the story. And I believe he's rushed over 100 yards every single game this season, even in their losses. And so that is a great shout out to the offensive line. All right, it's now time for our top performers segment where we pick out individuals. This is sponsored by Mary Kate Johnston of Remax Associates. If you're looking to buy or sell your house, Mary Kate will help you do it as if it was her own. An award-winning realtor with 20 years of experience. She helped my wife and I sell our previous house and purchase the one we're still in and have been for 16 years. And she helped us every single step of the way, still helps us when we have questions about refinancing, that kind of stuff. Just a great person. We highly recommend her. We've recommended her to dozens of friends who have also been satisfied and recommended them to her friends. You might think you understand the real estate market. It's either up or it's down. She understands both ends of it and understands whether you're buying, selling, or both, whether it's an upsize, a downsize, maybe a house for your child who's now, leaving college, leaving high school, or an elderly member of your family who either needs to sell or needs to move into 55 and older or whatever. She will help you every step of the way. Also, she's offering, if you mention you heard about her on this podcast, she's going to give you a free year of a home warranty package. And she did that for us when we bought. We still have it, and it's paid for itself every single year. Basically what a warranty package is the refrigerator breaks, you pay $100 for somebody to come check it out. If they total it, they give you a new one. Or if it costs $800 to fix, they fix it for you. Still only costs you $100. Nice. It's one of the smartest things my wife and I did. She's offering you a free year of that home warranty system if you mention that you heard about her on our show. And again, if you're interested in being an advertiser, sponsoring a segment like Mary Kate does, just let us know. You can see her website at marykatej.remax.com. And it's there. You'll see her multiple 5-star reviews and read what others have to say as well. All right, top performers, Marty, I'll let you go first.
I'm going to go with a game that almost made the list for one of our games to talk about, but that was a real surprise. And that was Friends just absolutely decimating Archmere yesterday. Robbie Tattersall, who seems to do everything for that Friends team. Of course, Tattersalls are all over the field whenever you're at one of the Friends games. There's always a Tattersall in one corner of the place. Rushed for 176 yards, 6'5" quarterback, by the way. He's going to go to college and play defense, I believe, but 176 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns, passed for 91 and another score. And they just absolutely dominated an Archmere team. Second week in a row, Archmere's lost, which is a surprise I'll talk about in a little bit. But Robbie Tattersall has done everything for this team. For the last 2 years, he's been the guy to go to there. They have a really good team around him as well. He just happens to be 6'5", so he literally stands out among the crowd. But Robbie Tattersall saw a great job in a rout of Archmere yesterday.
And I think he's going to Yale. I'm
Yes.
pretty sure he's
Yep.
going to Yale. I didn't know he was playing defense though, so that's interesting. But he might be good enough to play quarterback too. You never know.
That's true.
And so he's one of those all around players. All right, I'm going to go. I had Sam Crossan, who you already mentioned, Red Lion, the kicker. Another kicker, and we've mentioned him a couple times. James Collins for Sally's, 3 for 3 on extra points, remains perfect. Marty, there's not many football teams in the state of Delaware that have a guaranteed extra point kicker, let alone somebody who can also come in and kick a 35, 40, 45-yard field goal. And the Sal's have that in James Collins. The other person I'm going to give a shout out to on Sal's is Jake Tiberi. He had a 70-yard pick 6 in that game against Hodson, and that put Sally's up 14-0. And I felt that's when the momentum turned in the favor of the Sal's. Until that point, Hodson had pretty much punched and counterpunched their way, even though that, they were only trailing 7-0. And I forget the exact time period that interception happened. But once that happened, I thought, oh boy, that's not good for Hodson, and turned out to be the case.
No, and I think it was right before the half, and it looked like Hodson was going to tie it up before halftime, and that would just broke their back. I mean, It was only 14-0, but it was a huge, huge play. One more I'll get to is, because we didn't mention him, RJ Matthews for Howard. Howard continues to establish themselves as one of the teams to beat. They struggled with Mount Pleasant yesterday. Now, what I heard was the ground was very slick, and maybe that had something to do with it. But he rushed for 2 touchdowns, passed for a third, completed 14 of 16 passes, which I don't care how short or long you're throwing them. That's pretty darn good, for 124 yards as you keep Howard undefeated.
The short passes got Joe Montana into the Hall of Fame.
That's right.
So nothing wrong with short passes.
Nothing wrong.
All right, on to our biggest surprise segment. Again, that top performers, that was sponsored by Mary Kate Johnston at Remax. MaryKateJ.Remax.com is her website. We appreciate her support of the show. All right, biggest surprises, Marty. I think we've got the same one. I could not believe that Friends beat Archmere 34-9, especially Archmere coming off a loss. They hadn't lost in 15 games until they lost to Howard last week. I kind of expected them to show up a lot bigger than they did. Again, I didn't watch this game. Not sure the circumstances, but I would have never guessed that it would be 34-9 in favor of Friends. I wouldn't have been completely against taking it the other way, 34-9 in Archmere, based on what we know about Archmere. But again, hats off to Friends for pulling out that win on Saturday. That was my biggest shock by far. I thought it was a misprint when you texted me that.
and Friends opened with a pick 6 of Albero. So 2 weeks in a row now, he's been, I think he's thrown 4 interceptions in the last 2 games. If not, it's 3 at least. But they kind of stayed away from the turnover bugaboo for a long time. All of a sudden it's catching up with them a little bit. For me, I looking at Smyrna, and interesting, they've only scored more than 22 points once this season, and that's against CR. So, and the surprise is that it's the defense. When we looked in preseason at what they had offensively in that backfield, especially after they got Holman, the offense was going to rule the day. It is the defense. The surprise for me is it's defense that's carrying this Smyrna team and has them in a great position. I mean, right now, Smyrna Middletown kind of toss up, and we could throw some other teams in there too, but it would not surprise me to see Smyrna walk away with the state championship the year, and for it to be on the back of that defense, which just owned the day this week, again, in the backfield on almost every play against Sussex Central. So my surprise is that not the offense, but the defense driving Smyrna.
And people who follow high school football know that, when Smyrna won their 3 state championships, all you heard about was the offense. But the defense shut teams down. Mike Judy made that decision before, they got close a lot of times, but they were in shootouts with other teams. Remember that Sally's Smyrna shootout? I forget, there were 80-some points scored or whatever it was. More than 80. It was like 70 something.
I think it was 76 to 52. Yeah, it was crazy.
And that is when Mike Judy decided, if we're going to win state championships, we got to play defense. And they were one of the first teams, may still be the only team, where you either play offense or defense on that team. You don't play both. And so their defense is well rested every time they come onto the field because they haven't been playing offense. Most of these high school teams, 6 of the offensive guys go right over to the other side of the ball when you turn it over, whether it's in the trenches or in the secondary or linebacker.
Shoot, half of them, the quarterback never leaves the field. Right. Matthews for Howard, the quarterback for St. Elizabeth's, I know, they all just stay on and play safety or cornerback.
Yeah. So Mike Judy figured out, and it worked, and it's still working, that, you got to play, you got to win. Defense wins games. That's How many times have you heard that saying? And Smyrna, Marty, if I'm a betting man right now, I'm taking Smyrna in the points, whatever it is in the state championship game, but that could change. So, but Eagle up, as they say.
That's right.
All right. Games to watch next week. Here's the 4 interesting ones: Archmere at St. Mark's, Cape at Delmar, Hodson at Howard, Laurel at Woodbridge. The Archmere St. Mark's game, Marty, I had written down here heading in to Saturday morning that this could be a state title game preview. I'm going to retract that statement now. And I'm not sure who I would put in that other than St. Mark's. I think St. Mark's has cleared itself as the team to beat in District 2, I think. But that still could be an interesting game.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think St. Mark's, it's even more interesting now that Archmere is sort of getting in a position where they need a win to get some confidence going again. I wouldn't want to have to get a win against St. Mark's right now.
In the graveyard.
Rolling. Yeah, in the graveyard. I mean, they just destroyed Conrad yesterday, 54-14, but I think it was 40-8 at halftime. It was insane. So yeah, that's a tough one. I'll tell you what, one game I was surprised you didn't mention was Appo at Dover. Is this Friday, and that is one of the ones that's one of the top 2 I had listed here. Again, for the same reason we talked about Appo earlier, I think Appo is in such a good position, but we're going to find out about Dover as well, more and more about them. You could put McConomy up against that Dover defense. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And again, it is Dover's homecoming, which kind of makes it a little more in their favor as well. Hopefully they're going to have a good fan base out there. But I don't think you can go wrong with those games. I also I had St. Mark's and Howard on there. I also had Appo and Dover was my other game. So yeah, 2 great games to look at, but I agree with your other 3 games as well.
Yeah, I think Cape and Delmar. Cape with a week off, coming off a loss to Dover, a loss against a Class 2 team would really hurt Cape's reputation as being what we're been saying in the middle of the pack.
And that got much more interesting this weekend with the way Delmar played.
Yeah. And so, exactly. Delmar's, doing what they've done the past couple of years. They lose 1 or 2 early, and then they often run the table. And they're kind of put themselves in that position. This would be a huge win for Delmar from a point standpoint when the index comes out at the end of the year, being a Class 3 team. So we'll be interesting to see, how Mike Frederick has his team ready to play. And that's at Delmar, not an easy place to play on a Friday night. The other one I had is Hodson and Howard. Almost a must win for Hodson at this point. But it's out of class team, that they're playing. Howard, they're in a situation where they can afford to lose to Hodson. Not sure that's going to matter or not, but that's always an interesting game. That game will be at Howard. I think that's a Friday night game. I haven't looked, and it'll be interesting to see. I was trying to think, Marty, has there been a game played at Abyssinia started in the dark since that incident happened?
There has been. There hasn't been any. I don't think there's been any public school games.
It's been 2 private schools.
St. Elizabeth I think St. Elizabeth and Tatnall played 7:30 last weekend.
So anyway, we'll keep an eye on that and let you know if that game gets pushed up earlier for any reason. It's getting dark earlier. It's pitch dark at 7:00 now, and the clocks haven't even changed yet. All right, so we thought we'd introduce this segment. We did this last season, about halfway through the season. We've got 6 teams that are undefeated. We've got Caravel, Laurel, Charter, St. Mark's, St. E's, and Howard. And so, Marty, those teams, let me tell you who they're playing. Caravel plays at Odessa. Laurel plays at Woodbridge. Charter plays at Poly. St. Mark's home against Archmere. Charter is home against Poly. St. Mark's home against Archmere. St. Elizabeth at Indian River. And Howard home against Hodson. Of those 6 teams who are undefeated, which one do you think will not be undefeated next week at this time?
I got to be honest. I think they're all going to be undefeated this time next week. The only one that really kind of stands out is the Archmere St. Mark's game. But again, I think St. Mark's at home is just going to be too tough. Glasgow hung with St. Elizabeth's for a little while yesterday before it got away from them. Friends is just too strong right now. Caravel, again, just too strong for Odessa. And it's kind of an interesting game with Odessa being Class 1, Caravel being Class 2. It's interesting those two are playing each other again. But even Charter, Polytech, I think that might be a tougher game than some people might think, but I think Charter comes away with the win. St. Elizabeth's, again, they squeaked by IR last year. This is not the same IR team this year. And St. Elizabeth's is not relying solely on Benson this year. They have Chris Character out of the backfield, who's done a great job. So the 1-2 punch, they're keeping teams off balance. So I think all 6 of these teams come out undefeated next week.
All right. So you broke the rules for this little contest
I did.
where you got to pick somebody. I agree. You know what? I agree with you. certainly on 5 of them. And the 6th one I'm picking because I'm going to play by the rules, and I'm going to pick that Hodson is going to beat Howard. Hodson, I think, is at a situation where they have to win. This is a Class 2 team. You've got to beat a Class 2 team. They also, I think they still have, I know they still have Newark on their schedule. So they've got a couple opportunities for wins here rounding out the season. But if you've got any shot to make the playoffs, I think you've got to get this win and pick up your 2nd win of the season. Their other win coming against Cesar Rodney in the opener. So
to play by the rules, I'll give you my most likely, and that would be, and I did have this mentioned, Polytech is the one most likely to upset Charter. I don't think it's going to happen, but we've seen Polytech can put up points.
Yeah.
And the Charter defense has been playing so good, but Polytech also throws the ball around a little bit. So it'd be interesting to see how the Charter defense reacts to that. I still think they come out on top, but that's the most likely chance for an upset, I think, is Polytech over Charter.
All right. So you got Polytech. I've got Hodson. We'll see who is right next week at this time. All right. 2 more quick before we go to our shout outs. A reminder to please support our supporters, Mary Kate Johnston of Remax. That's marykatej.remax.com. And Andre Smith of Andre L. That's EL photography.com. Andre EL photography.com. Marty, I'll let you go first with a shout out.
My shout out for this week is real quick. It's not to any person. It's more to a concept, but it's to sportsmanship. Because I think what we saw this week, there were no incidents anywhere. In fact, we saw compliments online from St. Mark's to Conrad to St. Mark's, friends and Archmere exchange pleasantries. I think we're starting to see these teams realize that things are at stake here if we don't start getting ourselves under control. Right. There's still some personal fouls here and there, but that's always going to happen.
Yep.
For the most part, though, I didn't hear of a single incident from a referee or from anyone else. And I think kids and coaches and parents hopefully are getting the message that if you want things to keep going, you gotta perform in a sportsmanlike manner, no matter what side you're on. So my shout out is to sportsmanship this week, because I think this was a great example of it.
It is. And you made a great point earlier when we talked about Appo's district's new rules of, 5 tickets per person is better than 2 tickets per person. And would that be the next step? And we don't want that to happen. So players and spectators, please behave in the bleachers and in the stadiums where you are. All right. My shout outs to a former Delaware High School quarterback, Nolan Henderson, who guided the Hens to continue their undefeated season. And the reason I'm giving him a shout out, Marty, is because I was one of his naysayers. And I've told him this, and we've discussed it, and he knows it. And I've apologized. I was dead wrong. And it wasn't that I didn't think he could play college football. I didn't think he was going to be good enough to ever start at the University of Delaware.
You and me both.
And I think he's been at Delaware now about 12 years, it seems.
I was going to say.
Between it seems like a decade ago when he
celebrated his 30th birthday this weekend.
State championship, yeah. But I'll tell you what, I was at a different angle for this game, because what I did is, it was Parents' Weekend. It was packed. I parked as close as I could in the media parking lot, and I just poked in. I needed one seat because my kids, of course, as soon as we landed, they head out on their own at this age to find people.
Yep.
And so I sat on the 50-yard line in row 2, and it's the first time I've watched him zip the ball around the field. And Marty, he's got to have one of the strongest arms at the FCS level.
I agree.
I mean, he was throwing those balls on a rope, and he's quick, and he's agile, and he's smart. He makes good decisions. He throws the ball where only for the most part, where only his player can catch it. And so I just wanted to, I don't know, Nolan probably doesn't listen to this high school show, but, I'm just so happy for him that I was wrong. And I'm so happy that he's the starting quarterback at the University of Delaware. And he's got to be on a watch list. I don't think they've announced it for the quarterbacks yet, but he's got to be on a watch list for end of season awards, because
I agree. I think that the player of the year award at the FCS level, the Peyton Award, I think he's got to be in the running for that. My only criticism of Nolan is the same thing it was when he first started. And that is, he constantly thinks he's the toughest hombre on the field and subjects himself to some wicked hits sometimes. And he's a tough kid.
Oh, yeah.
This team, we found out what happened last year when he couldn't play. And I know that Ryan Carty, I heard him say at one point was, look, the kid plays like he plays. But but I do wish he was a little more judicious with the use of his body when it came to going up against defenders. We know he's tough. We know he can take anything, and he has been phenomenal. I did my mea culpa with him last year, where it just, I did not see this coming at all. He was a good high school quarterback. He was great on screen passes. He could occasionally throw the ball deep down the field. Never saw this coming. I mean, this kid is an absolute star, and if he was any bigger, he'd have a chance at another level. His only problem is he's a little small.
Yeah.
But you can't tell that from his arm. My God. I never saw that arm strength coming from him. I mean, some of the throws that he uncorks, and he'll outthrow some of these guys on occasion. Pitts going down the sideline. You're like, holy smokes. I don't remember that in high school, but I agree 100%. I did want to
I'll let you go one more, but I'm going to do Nolan a favor. I don't think Nolan's good enough to play in the NFL. There it is.
We just did it. There it is. I'll echo that. Say, Nolan, you're not good enough to play in the league. So 5 years from now, when he gets straight, or when he's playing in the Pro Bowl, we can say, hey, we helped with that.
All right, go ahead. You got one more?
I actually didn't have one more shout out. I did want to correct one thing. I heard you say earlier, but because of the interception for Sally's, the 70-yard touchdown, it wasn't Tiberi because he's the backup quarterback. It was Jake Ziegler. Who had the 70-yard interception return.
Thanks for correcting that.
I looked it up just to make sure, because I wanted to make sure he got the credit for that.
I had Ziegler in my notes, and somewhere else I was watching the game. So I was going by what I was seeing. I was going by what whatever. And but then somebody put on social media somewhere that it was Jacob Tiberi.
They did.
And that's when I changed it. So I literally had that. And so thank you for correcting that.
No
so
problem.
Jacob Ziegler deserves that shout out. For that. All right, that's going to do it for us for this week. Week 4 in the books. And so going to week 5 next week. Let's hope it's an incident-free week. Again, congratulations to Appo on making a move that we hope will work for all 3 of those schools. And we hope that the rest of the schools around the state of Delaware take whatever works well in that new system to ensure that the students are as safe as possible and the fans when they go out to these games. So great job by the Appoquinimink School District. All right, we hope you have a great week. For Marty Sheehan, I'm John Buzby. Have a great sports week.